Okay, today I'm presenting on my capstone paper, eco-theology. What is eco-theology? Eco-theology describes theological discourse that highlights the whole household of God's creation, especially the world of nature, as an interrelated system. An eco is from the Greek word for household, oikos. I'll start with Joseph Sittler. He was a Lutheran theologian, pastor of Messiah Lutheran Church in Cleveland, Ohio. And for most of his life, he was a professor of theology at Chicago Lutheran Seminary, and then at the Divinity School at the University of Chicago. He once said that nature is a theater of grace. And he was the first to give the term ecology public prominence as a theological construct, and also took the lead in establishing conversations with ecologists. He wrote 2 books about the church's responsibility for the earth's ecology. The Ecology of Faith in 1961 and The Care of the Earth, 1964. I'll start off with the visions of eco-theology. The first vision is the idea of divine immanence in the whole cosmos. So, what is divine immanence? When something is immanent, it means that it is inherent or exists and remains within something else. Take Ephesians chapter 4, verse 6. God is over all, through all, and in all. Or Colossians chapter 1, verse 17. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And divine eminence, meaning in his word. Take Isaiah 41, verse 10, I am with you. Or in his son from Matthew 1, verse 23. Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And in his spirit that teaches, helps, empowers, guides, comforts, and cultivates those he indwells. The second vision of eco-theology is a relational, ecological, rather than a hierarchical understanding of God, humans, and the created world. Everything, including human beings, is connected and interdependent. And as Paul Tillich once said, the self without a world is empty. The world without a self is dead. Another prominent person is Martin. Well, his thought was a influential thought in eco-theology. Martin Buber, an Australian Jewish and Israeli philosopher, once said, the world is not comprehensible, but it is embraceable through the embracing of one of its beings. In his book, I and Thou, Buber states that there are 2 types of relationships. I-thou is a relationship where the I, for the I, the thou is not an object to be manipulated, such as a couple in love. The other relationship is I-it. It is a relationship where the I enters into an objectifying relationship with the other. An example, a carpenter using a hammer. And today we often see people becoming objects in a relationship or in the world. Behold the lilies. H. Paul Sadamir says there's another relationship, an I-ens relationship. Ens is Latin for being. He argues when you behold the lilies, you are contemplating an ens. He is referring to Matthew chapter 6, verse 28, when Jesus says, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin. He states that I come to a halt and I contemplate that lily of the field. I do not immediately think about its cells. As an ens, the lily stands before me in its own right, a beautiful entity, posited there for its own sake. I contemplate it and am captivated by it. I do not penetrate behind its sheer givenness. Now, I like to share the traditional Inuit calendar. The Inuit mark the course of a year by observing regular phases of new and full moons. They name periods of time roughly corresponding to months that highlighted the birth of wildlife and other seasonal changes important to their livelihood. Inuit distinguished 6 seasons during the course of the year, which were related to the presence of ice on the coastal waters and snow on the land. Here is an example, or the Inuit traditional calendar. As you could see, they observed when, say, for January, the Inuit name for that time of year is Hublut, and that means when ground cracks from frost. And say for May, Nukalilut, when caribou cows give birth. So how they knew which time or season of the year it was, they would observe the nature around them and they'll know what's coming next. They were really observant. And these are the seasons. So you could see like the July to September, Aoyak, summer, meaning open water. So they, like I said, they really were contemplating, just like what Sadamir was speaking about earlier. Another example of the Inuit year. Here it outlines, say in June, you get geese, eggs. In the summer, July and August, you'll get berries. In October, November, you'll get ducks. So every season, there's wildlife or berries to harvest. And Nunat Salvut actually means our beautiful land in Inuktitut. And for you guys, I remember you guys talking about how to pronounce it. So this is one way you could pronounce it. Nunat Salvut. You could try if you like. Okay, and just show some personal pictures. We harvest, we get wood for our stove, and we also cut lumber. We haul logs and cut our own lumber. Also, my kids here going to set the goose decoys. My eldest son with McKinley making pitsicks for dried fish and smoked fish. This is out by our cabin. Rodding, my youngest one just caught one there, my girl over there with the decoys, and their grandfather. These are my 3 children picking ptarmigans, we call partridges. Ice fishing, my 3 kids. Rodding in the summer, my eldest son up in Hebron, he caught that on a rod, and it actually turned the front of the boat, it was so strong. And my kids, they're finding eggs on islands, picking berries, and having some mussels on a fire. The third vision of eco-theology is a radically reinterpreted view of human dominion over nature in terms of partnership with nature. Some see nature worship as something contrary to biblical faith. God is often seen as creating nature rather than being an expression of it. Protecting an animal or a plant because it is a member of an endangered species is highly individualistic. Species are not endangered in isolation, but because the ecosystems of the forest, prairie, or wetland in which they live are endangered. So we sometimes say, oh, save the seal, save the panda, but we don't often think about the land they're actually on. Ecological communities are the context in which particular animals or plants live or die. And we have to consider that all ecosystems, not just wild ones, but the ones in which humans must learn to share their lives with a great variety of animals and plants that have to be protected. And the fourth vision of eco-theology, a commitment to justice for all creatures, not just humans, highlighting the needs of the impoverished masses and endangered species around the globe. This brings us to questions we have to ponder. How can Christians be effectively inspired to live out their own environmental faith missions? What are the keys to the prophetic dialogue to productive discussions in faith communities? A helpful study by Aaron Lowe's Beneval examines 5 effects of group dynamics in 3 sections. Discussion engages the minds and hearts of members of faith communities, like discussions about climate change, discussions about creation, about the land, by renegotiating worldviews to the creation of new doctrinal synthesis and integrating experiences in nature with spirituality. She said, it is vital for parishioners to experience their faith community as a free and open space for honest questioning and exploration of difficult questions with similarly committed people. And sometimes land and land use and creation is a touchy topic amongst people. Then building on minds and hearts attuned to climate change, discussions within faith communities further deepens and expands values by reinforcing shared commitments to social justice and expanding the definition of social justice to embrace creation care. And she said the most common starting point is to see that those most economically vulnerable, and at the margins of society are also those most viciously threatened by the effects of pollution and climate change. Finally, faith-based environmentalists are further empowered by the unifying power of worship and celebration and the ability of communal action to leverage the leadership of pioneers. By bringing together familiar scripture texts, music, and rituals with a renewed emphasis on the eco-justice mission, it has a strong and unifying potential to further that mission. Biveno concludes that the crisis of justice and peace, poverty and inequality are now inextricably linked to ecological degradation, urging Christians to reimagine core symbols and renew our covenant with the earth. Guided by the Spirit who renews the face of the earth, faith communities can share a journey of conversion to a profoundly renewed Christian mission today. I'd like to share a news clip. It's a recent news clip from Global News, and is talking about wanting to extract minerals for batteries for vehicles. So it's kind of like, what should we do? In one side, they're trying to lower the emissions by getting the minerals needed for the battery operated cars. And the other is indigenous people wanting to protect the land. So I'll just share this video now.
It's widely viewed as the key to unlocking Ontario's electric vehicle manufacturing strategy. The region in Northern Ontario known as the Ring of Fire, rich with minerals needed for EV batteries.
We need to build up stable homegrown supply chains that unlock the economic potential of the critical minerals.
The province has been trying to pave a path forward, working with 2 First Nations to build an all-seasons road to the Ring of Fire. But the Ford government is now facing opposition. An eruption at Queen's Park from some Northern Indigenous leaders who say the Premier is refusing to meet with them to hear their concerns.
The Premier didn't even look at us, didn't even respond to the questions I was being asked.
The central issue, consultation and final say. First Nations want to exercise greater control over their lands, saying mining speculators have been running roughshod.
The Ring of Fire is something that's being fast-tracked without the involvement of our people. More importantly, without the informed participation and informed consent of our people.
At question period, the government was pressed on the situation.
Will this government commit today to obtain the consent of First Nations?
From the outset, our government has been focused on consensus and relationship building, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to resource projects and legacy infrastructure.
The answer unsatisfactory to some who say they're willing to escalate to ensure their voices are heard.
We are prepared to even risk our own lives to protect them.
At Queen's Park, Colin DeMello, Global News.
Thank you. Any